Hello everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. Let's talk about water. We came from the water. Life, as far as we know, originated in some way in water. When exploration is done on other worlds in the solar system, one of the first things they look for is evidence of water. For if there is water, there is some chance that life may have existed on this world. Every living thing needs water. The cell, the building block of life, needs water in order to function. Without it, everything dries up and dies. It is as simple as that. There are some things that can go enormous amounts of time without a replenishing of water. They somehow store their supply of water within them, and it lasts until the next refill. But this is the exception. The rule is that everything needs a fairly constant supply of water, or else it will wither and die. We are no exception. We can go a day without water, but it is not easy. Going 3 days without water could be fatal. Going 5 is a virtual death sentence. A week is probably about the maximal limit. The human body simply wasn't made to go that long without a fix from its original source. It is strange that this tasteless and colorless substance could be so essential to our survival. It has no calories and thus gives no energy. Most people wouldn't order it in a restaurant, considering it a waste of a good opportunity for something tasty. We hardly even count it in recipes, deeming it the same value as motor oil for a car. Necessary, but not really worth talking about. Yet if we went a day without it, we would be ready to break down doors to get it. We wouldn't care if it was flavorless or filtered or had electrolytes or where it came from. We would just down the stuff like our lives depended on it, which they do. This week's Parsha is called Chukat. That word means law of, an incomplete phrase that introduces the bizarre concept of the red heifer, the entirely red cow that somehow purifies the spiritual impurity associated with a corpse. We are going to skip over the details of this strange substance, as tempting as it is to go into it. Suffice it to note that one of the essential ingredients of the mixture, along with the ashes of the burned cow, is spring water. From there, the Parsha next mentions the death of Moshe's sister Miriam. She is mentioned only a few times in the Torah, but has managed to lodge a place as one of the most significant figures in the text. Her recorded activities consist of her suggesting to Pharaoh's daughter, who had brought the baby Moshe out of the water where he had been cast on a small boat, that his mother would nurse him until he was weaned. She isn't even mentioned there by name, just that she was Moshe's sister. Next, she is recorded as leading the women in a celebratory song after the victorious crossing of the sea following the Exodus. This is probably her real moment of glory in the Torah, but even here it is overshadowed by the much more elaborate song led by Moshe in which everyone participated. We only hear the first verse of her song, and it seems to be more or less a copy of the main song, which has come down in Jewish history as the prime example of celebration over divine salvation. But there is no question that Miriam's name is associated with this great moment, and thus her position as one of the great feminine voices in Jewish history. The next incident is by no means complimentary. This comes when she and her brother Aaron discuss some apparently problematic issue with Moshe concerning his wife. Though it is unclear what the problem was, there is no question that they were both taken to task over this complaint by no less than God. Whatever the issue was, they had no right to voice complaints against Moshe, who was in a class by himself as a prophet of God and thus above such petty matters. From that point, the only mentionings of Miriam are right here with her death, which only takes a few words, and a brief noting of her in the lineage of her family. Traditionally, her death is considered to have taken place towards the end of the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. The place she is buried is called Kadesh, a fairly common name in the Bible, so it is difficult to know exactly where this was. Consequently, there is no trace of Miriam's grave, unlike many other figures of the Bible. Immediately after this, there is an incident revolving around a lack of water, and the by now familiar complaint that it was a grand mistake to leave Egypt. Even though most of those who were adults when they left Egypt were already dead, there is still this longing for the good old days when they had, quote, seeds, figs, grapes, pomegranates, and water to drink. This was to be the last of this series of complaints, and is only fitting that water plays a prominent part in it. The reaction of Moshe and Aaron to all this is somewhat uncharacteristic. After being told by God that he should take his staff and speak to a rock of some sort so that it would bring forth water, Moshe took the opportunity to berate the Israelites for their rebellious attitude, saying, "Can we produce water from this rock?" He then hits the rock twice for some reason, and lo and behold, out comes the water, and the incident is over, or so we would expect. The next two verses have God taking Moshe and Aaron to task for what they did in this incident. They are told, quote, "Because you didn't believe in me to sanctify me in the presence of the Israelites, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given to you." Although it is unclear what Moshe and Aaron did to warrant this harsh judgment, this was indeed to be their fate. They would not be the ones to complete the fateful journey into the Holy Land and would never actually enter into it. What exactly they did wrong is the subject of countless commentaries on this section of the Torah over the past 2,000 years. The final verse of the incident calls this place, quote, "the waters of contention," for this was where the Israelites contended with God, who was sanctified. It seems that although Moshe and Aaron did not play their part sufficiently in the sanctification of God, God was nevertheless sanctified at these waters. Towards the end of the parsha, we read some strange verses that seem a bit out of place that concern a well, which of course gives them water. Another song is interjected into the text about this well, describing it as, quote, "a well dug by princes, sunk by volunteers of the people, carved out with their staffs." This strange poem is difficult to translate, and it is totally unclear why it is even mentioned at all. It is simply a poem about a well, and of course, the water found there. All these incidents dealing with water make this the parsha about water. It does cover most of those 40 years of wandering around the desert, so it is no surprise that water was a major issue. To sing about water when wandering around in the desert for decades should not be all that unexpected. While we may not make our songs about water, preferring to focus more about love or sex or war or peace, for those who lived in the desert, water was the most important thing. It made something as wonderful as love pale in comparison. It made peace a distant dream that hovered somewhere on the horizon that could only be reached if one had enough water to get there. Wars and battles were important, but more often than not, they were fought over water. Sex was not even worth mentioning, as anyone who has undergone a serious bout with thirst can testify. When water is not to be found, all else is nothing. Perhaps we can tie all these water-related matters together. Why is Miriam so famous, even though really very little is recorded about her? Why were Moshe and Aaron so castigated for what was so seemingly minor a breach of protocol? Why is this ritual on the red heifer so vital in spiritual purification that it warrants an entire chapter in the Torah? What is this strange poem about, and why is it even here? They are all about water. Miriam watched as Moshe was placed in the water and was there when he was rescued. She led the women in the Song of the Sea, a celebration of salvation in the midst of water. These two incidents, really the only ones that she is truly remembered for, warranted her eternal association with the well that is traditionally called after her, the Well of Miriam. It was this well which somehow vanished after her death, causing the trauma of the lack of water, which resulted in Moshe and Aaron uncharacteristically losing their cool. This Well of Miriam is traditionally considered to be the well celebrated in that short poem that seems so out of place. The waters of contention were the direct result of this well vanishing. For the lack of water after having a dependable supply for so many decades can wreak havoc on the most stable of societies. It was in dealing with the fear that a lack of water brings that caused the single greatest failure in Moshe's illustrious career. He should have realized what a lack of water does to people, even those who have been through 40 years of wandering around the desert. It can take a person or a group from security and contentment into total fear and rebellion. Hitting that rock when he should have simply used his voice to quell their fears only fed the problem. Sanctification of God comes when people realize that God is their source of life, or in this case, their source of water. Hitting the rock made it seem like it was a matter of brute strength and not faith. There is a story associated with the Baal Shem Tov, the 18th century founder of the Hasidic movement of Judaism. He had told a certain man to make an apparently pointless long journey over the Carpathian Mountains to reach a certain place and then return. The man did all this and nothing of note happened. Upon finding the Baal Shem Tov again, he asked him why he sent him on this pointless task, which took weeks. The Baal Shem Tov asked him if he encountered a certain stream in the middle of his travels, in the middle of nowhere. He replied that he did, both in going and returning. The Baal Shem Tov asked what he then did. He said that he said a blessing over the water and drank from it. The Baal Shem Tov told the man that nobody had ever recited a blessing on the water of that stream, and that this man had filled that spiritual vacuum in the world. He blessed the water of the stream. Perhaps it was worth the journey of a lifetime to do nothing other than bless the simple water of an unknown stream. For that is what water is, our source of life and our connection to the source of everything. It is from where we came, and it stays with us every single moment of our lives. In a sense, it is perhaps the closest thing we have that in some way resembles God in its all-giving power. It is salvation and contention, producing both anger of frustration and song of celebration. It is water and it is life. Shabbat Shalom.